Let's go ahead now and create a brand new project. So we go out here, I'm just going to go ahead and start up Eclipse. So when it comes up, it's going to ask me about my workspace. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new workspace here. And again, a workspace is just a grouping of how projects are held together inside of Eclipse. It's loosely like a solution in the sense that it contains multiple projects. It's not as much like a Visual Studio Solutions in the sense that solutions in Visual Studio very often create natural links between the projects inside of there. Eclipse, that's not the case. A workspace is really just a group of projects. There's no automatic association between those projects. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into my work folder for Pluralsight. So I've just put in a folder here, work, Pluralsight workspace. Go ahead and do that. Open that up. Okay, now Eclipse opens up. And because it's a brand new empty workspace, it shows me this welcome screen. If it was an existing workspace, it would show me all the projects in it. I'm going to go ahead and close this welcome screen up here. And so you see this layout. Initially, it looks a lot like what you would expect inside of Visual Studio, and you'll find that things are very consistent with Visual Studio, but there'll be a lot of differences as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we'll go ahead and create a project. So File, New. I want to choose an Android application project. Choose that. And now it's going to launch me into a wizard. And what we want to do now is go through and answer the questions in that wizard. So we're here in the first screen of the wizard, and this is where the naming comes in. Right, so what I'll call this is my just say a demo app. Now, as I mentioned, the naming here is really important. Again, Visual Studio, very often that naming just ties back to the project name inside of Visual Studio. The names you put into this screen will affect a number of things. This first thing, application name, will actually show up in the Google Play Store. Maybe also show up in some of the settings screens on the device. So you want to make sure you pick a name here that's meaningful and representative of your app. The project name, that particular field really is just a value inside of Eclipse. Not a big deal. This last one, package name. Now, that's important for a couple of reasons. One thing is that, and we'll talk more about this later, is that in Java, the concept of packages are important. It's how classes are kind of grouped together. But even more importantly is that this package name is how Google Play identifies your application over time. And what that means is that when you build an application and you put it out there on the Google Play Store and people start downloading it and so forth, when you want to go ahead and release an update to your application, the package name as it appears in this field must match the previous versions. If you change the package name, as far as Google Play is concerned, it's a brand new application. So it ties all apps together by the package name. Now, obviously, that means that a package name must be unique throughout the entire world of Google Play. So the way we achieve that is by using what are called reverse domain names. In other words, like Pluralsight owns Pluralsight.com, right? And that is unique around the world because it's registered. Well, we're going to call this com.pluralsight, right? So we're going to take that example off there, put in Pluralsight. And then usually it's dot and then the application name. And again, this must stay consistent throughout the life of your application. If that changes, as far as Google Play is concerned, it's a new application. Now, these bottom fields down here, these indicate what versions of Android you want to support. As I mentioned before, we'll talk more about those later. So once we get that all set up, we'll go ahead and just click Next. So here now inside of this wizard screen, the first one is create a custom launcher icon. In other words, do you want to define your own icon, or do you want to just take the default one? You know, a lot of times if you're just doing test projects, you can go and uncheck that. It'll just give you a default, kind of cute little Android icon. We're going to leave it checked just so we can see what that screen looks like. The second one, create activity. What that's actually asking you is, will your app have a user interface? We'll find later on in the series that there's a way to build apps that only run in the background. So this is saying, do you want us to generate a default user interface for you or not? We're going to go ahead and leave that checked. We're not going to worry about the rest of the ones on here right now. Just one quick one here. Create project in workspace. You notice that basically it's just defaulting to adding it to the workspace that we're currently set up inside of. So that's fine. So go ahead and click Next. So now here on the Configure Launcher icon, right? Again, this is the icon that will appear on the launcher screen of the device, as well as in some of the settings screens on the device as well. So the initial setting here is it gives us this kind of cute little Android-looking guy. We, of course, can go out there and choose some other icon file that we have set up if we'd like. But one of the things I like about the way this is set up is that, obviously in highly professional apps, you want to go ahead and create your own custom icon. you can also take advantage of some clip art that's inside of here as well, right? So clip art is just predefined images that we can use. Right, so we go in here and we click choose there, and these are just a bunch of images we can take advantage of. Right, so if I'm doing something maybe here just around, I'm going to say I'm doing a recording app or something. I'll click on that. That sets it up for me. And you notice that it actually looks pretty cool. I can actually change the foreground colors and the background colors. Things like shapes around it. So like I want to put a circle around it so it looks kind of neat in a circle maybe. This trim surrounding blank space, what this says is that if the image has a lot of blank space around it, if you click trim, what it does is it actually enlarges the visible portion of it and kind of cuts away any kind of effect white space around it. Right? And generally, I like doing that. Also here, if you get to the text, you can actually create an icon that's based on text. Right? So if I want to my icon to be something like, cool, it will actually put that text in there as the icon. And I can actually change the font that I'm using and so forth. So I can do some really neat stuff here. Right? So in fact, why don't we just do this? I'll change this to say something like demo, because it's my demo app. Now you notice over here there's this preview window, and it's showing you kind of different versions of it. This is really useful because one of the things that's important to keep in mind in Android is that, unlike something like iOS, where one hardware manufacturer closely controls the devices, in Android, there's a wide variety of hardware out there. So there can be a lot of difference in screen resolutions. So what this is showing us is, based on the screen resolutions, what our icon will look like on each one of those. Right? So this is kind of the lowest resolution that's showing us here up to very high resolution. So we get a real sense of what it looks like. This is really important, particularly when you're dealing with maybe richer icons using a lot of graphics, because some graphics may look better at high resolutions, some may not look as good at lower resolutions. So it just gives you a real sense of what it's going to look like. So we'll jump to the next screen. So now here we're talking about activity again. Now we mentioned that activity is the user interface. In effect, an activity is a form, right, in terms of kind of .NET concepts. And so it's actually a little bit more than a form, but fundamentally it's the UI, it's a screen in that sense. So again, we're just saying that we want to have an activity. And this is saying that, just some simple things here, that do you want just a very vanilla activity? Right? Do you want something that actually takes care of the full screen, gets the status bar out of the way when the user interacts with it? And then there's even this master detail, which is kind of a neat one, because it automatically adapts between a tablet layout, which is larger, and a phone layout, which is smaller. We'll talk a lot about how to do that later in the series, how to deal with those situations in terms of device differences. We're just going to say with a blank activity, which just says, just give me a very blank layout form, and I'll build on it from there. Choose next. Now this is the last screen in the setup, and basically you've got the activity name and what's called the layout name. Now, the activity name is the name that you want to give the class that you'll use to render this initial screen or initial form. By default, that name will also show up on the form. We can change that very easily. The other thing is this layout name. The way that Android works is that although you can programmatically or dynamically put controls on an activity, in Android terms, a control is called a view. So you can put views onto an activity by just saying create this instance, create that instance. But in most cases, we instead use layout files, which are XML files. So this layout name field is the name of the layout resource or the XML resource that you want to use to define the layout. So we're basically naming the class and then the XML layout. All right, so we'll just go ahead and keep those by default. Navigation type just shows some of the more advanced things we can do in terms of like the drop down I mentioned or tabs and so forth. We'll look at those again a lot more later in the series. So now we click finish, and that goes ahead and creates our project. And now you can see our project is created. We got a list of files on the left hand side here. Right, we've got a UI editor for laying out our activity, and of course we can deal with the source codes. So we've successfully created a project.